Humanity just accomplished the impossible. We created machines that think faster than us, connected billions of people instantaneously, nearly eradicated extreme poverty, and are about to become a multi-planetary species. We should be celebrating the greatest moment of triumph in our history. Instead, suicide rates are skyrocketing in the most developed nations. Anxiety has become a global epidemic, and a growing number of young people claim they wish they had never been born. How is it possible that at the peak of our success as a species, so many people feel their individual lives are worthless? This paradox reveals something disturbing about our civilization. While we were conquering the outer world, something began to crumble in our inner world. And the explanation for this phenomenon will completely change how you see the problems of our time. Because we have discovered that all the crises dominating newspaper headlines, from political polarization to religious extremism, from rampant consumerism to the collapse of institutions, are merely symptoms of a single, much deeper civilizational disease. A disease that is infecting not just isolated individuals, but entire societies. And when you understand what this disease is, you will understand why none of the solutions we are trying are working, and why the real cure requires a much more radical transformation than any political leader is willing to admit. For tens of thousands of years, since our species developed the ability to create and share stories, the meaning of human life was provided by grand collective narratives that organized our understanding of the cosmos, our place within it, and our destiny as individuals and as a species. These narratives were not mere stories in the modern sense of the word. They were complete systems of meaning that connected every aspect of individual experience to the larger fabric of reality. In tribal societies, each person was born into a cosmology that explained not only how the world was created and how it worked, but also what their specific role was in this grand tapestry of existence. The hunter knew that his quest for food was not just a biological necessity, but a sacred ritual that connected his tribe to the spirits of animals and the forces of nature. The woman who gathered fruits and prepared food was not simply executing domestic tasks. She was participating in a cosmic cycle that sustained life and maintained the balance between the human world and the spiritual world. Every action, no matter how simple, was imbued with meaning because it was part of a larger narrative that gave purpose and direction to existence. With the advent of agriculture and the emergence of the first civilizations, these narratives became even more elaborate and sophisticated. The great world religions emerged as monumental systems of meaning that offered comprehensive answers to the fundamental questions of human existence. Christianity promised that each individual soul was precious in God's eyes, and that each life, however humble, had a divine purpose in the cosmic plan of salvation. Islam offered a clear framework for living in harmony with Allah's will, where every action could be an act of worship that brought the believer closer to paradise. Hinduism and Buddhism provided detailed maps for navigating through cycles of death and rebirth toward final liberation from suffering. These were not just religious beliefs in the narrow sense we attribute to the term today. They were sophisticated technologies for creating meaning that transformed the most mundane experiences of daily life into elements of an epic spiritual journey. A medieval peasant working the fields was not simply cultivating wheat, he was participating in a cosmic drama where his honest work and faith could guarantee his eternal salvation. A mother raising her children was not just perpetuating her genetic lineage, she was participating in God's divine plan for humanity and forming souls that could find their way back to God. Even when modernity began to question these traditional religious narratives, new secular meta-narratives emerged to fill the vacuum of meaning. The Enlightenment offered the narrative of human progress through reason and science, where each scientific discovery and technological advance was a step toward a utopian future where ignorance, superstition, and unnecessary suffering would be eliminated. Nationalism provided powerful narratives about belonging to a historical community that transcended individual life, where each citizen was a link in a chain extending from a glorious past to a promising future. Socialism and communism created epic visions of social transformation where every worker was a hero in the historical struggle to create a just and egalitarian society. Even liberal individualism offered its own narrative of meaning, where each person had the right and responsibility to create their own authentic life and realize their unique potential through free choices and self-determination. All these modern ideologies, despite their fundamental differences, shared a crucial characteristic. They offered individuals a sense of participation in something greater than themselves, a grand story where their individual lives had meaning because they contributed to a collective project of cosmic importance. What happened in recent decades, especially accelerated by technological revolutions and globalization, was a process of fragmentation and dissolution of these meta-narratives that provided meaning. Science, which was supposed to lead us to a utopian future, proved capable of creating weapons of mass destruction and contributing to an environmental crisis that threatens the very continuity of our civilization. The political ideologies that promised to create perfect societies produced some of the most brutal regimes in human history. Traditional religions lost much of their cultural authority in a world where scientific explanations replaced mythological narratives about the origin and functioning of the universe. Nationalism, which was supposed to unite communities in noble projects, often degenerated into xenophobia and destructive conflict. Liberal individualism, which promised freedom and personal fulfillment, often left people isolated and overwhelmed with the impossible responsibility of creating meaning from nothing, as if each person were a novelist obliged to write the plot of their own life without access to an established literary genre or shared narrative vocabulary. We now live in an era of generalized skepticism toward all grand narratives, a period that postmodern philosophers called the end of meta-narratives, where the very idea that there could be a true and universal story about the meaning of human existence is viewed with suspicion and distrust. This skepticism toward grand narratives did not arise from nothing. It was the result of a painful historical process where one after another, the ideologies that promised to save humanity revealed their tragic limitations and unintended consequences. People learned to distrust any belief system that claims to have definitive answers to the fundamental questions of existence, and this distrust is in many respects healthy and necessary. The problem is that by rejecting the problematic meta-narratives of the past, we also lost the psychological and social benefits these narratives provided. We discovered that it is much easier to deconstruct a system of meaning than to build a new one, and that freedom from the oppressive narratives of the past does not automatically result in a more meaningful or satisfying life. On the contrary, the absence of shared narratives that give meaning to collective experience has left many people in a state of existential disorientation that can be even more distressing than living under an imperfect but functional narrative. It is as if we had demolished an old house full of structural problems, but still have not managed to build a new one, and now we are exposed to the elements without adequate shelter. Digital technology, which initially seemed to promise a democratization of access to information and an expansion of possibilities for human connection, ended up paradoxically contributing to this crisis of meaning in ways we are only beginning to understand. Social networks created a cacophony of voices where all perspectives compete for attention in a marketplace of ideas that favors the sensational over the true and the viral over the profound. Instead of facilitating the emergence of new shared narratives, digital technology further fragmented our understanding of reality, creating informational bubbles where different groups of people effectively live in parallel universes with different sets of facts and different versions of history. The algorithm that was supposed to connect us with relevant information often traps us in cycles of confirmation of our pre-existing beliefs, making it increasingly difficult to find common ground to build narratives that can be accepted by different segments of society. The result is a fragmentation of the social fabric, where different groups not only disagree about solutions to shared problems, but cannot even agree on what the problems are or on the basic facts of reality. Furthermore, the accelerated pace of technological change created a sense of impermanence that makes it difficult to invest emotionally in any long-term narrative about the future. The skills a person develops today may become obsolete tomorrow. Institutions that seemed solid and permanent are constantly reorganized or replaced by new digital structures. Jobs that formed the basis of professional identity for entire generations disappear or are transformed in fundamental ways. In a world of constant change, it becomes psychologically risky to develop a deep sense of identity based on any specific social role or any particular vision of the future, because the only constant is change itself. This constant impermanence contributes to a sense of superficiality in life experience, where people feel as if they are always adapting to new circumstances without ever finding a solid foundation on which they can build a lasting sense of purpose and direction. The modern economy also contributed to this crisis of meaning by transforming every aspect of human existence into a commodity that can be bought and sold in the market. Work, which traditionally was a way of participating in community life and contributing to the common good, became primarily a means of earning money to buy products that promise happiness, but often deliver only temporary satisfaction. Education, which should be a process of developing wisdom and character, became an industry focused on producing qualified consumers and efficient workers. Even human relationships are increasingly mediated by commercial platforms that transform the search for love and friendship into a consumer experience where people are evaluated and discarded like products on a digital shelf. This commodification of human experience erodes the sense of intrinsic meaning of activities and relationships, reducing everything to its exchange value in the market and leaving people with the feeling that they are living artificial and superficial lives. I need to pause for a moment to ask you directly which aspect of this transformation we are discussing most resonates with your own experience. Do you also feel this fragmentation, this difficulty finding narratives that make sense of the chaos of modern life? I know we often keep these concerns to ourselves, perhaps for fear of seeming pessimistic or nostalgic in a world that celebrates innovation and progress without questioning. But your concerns about the meaning and direction of your life are valid and probably shared by more people than you imagine. Share in the comments, I feel we lost our way when your voice can help create a space where we can honestly discuss this collective search for meaning instead of pretending we are all perfectly adapted to this new reality. And perhaps by naming this common experience together, we can begin to imagine ways to rebuild meaning in our lives. What makes this crisis particularly challenging is that it cannot be solved simply by returning to the narratives of the past, however comfortable they may seem in retrospect. The historical process that dissolved these meta-narratives also gave us knowledge and perspectives that make it impossible to ignore their limitations and contradictions. We know too much about the diversity of human cultures to accept that any particular belief system is universally true. We understand too much about the psychological and social mechanisms of meaning creation to not perceive how many of our certainties are social constructions rather than absolute truths. We have learned too much about the unintended consequences of utopian ideologies to embrace again grandiose promises of total transformation of the human condition. This is the paradoxical situation we find ourselves in. We need narratives that give meaning to our lives, but our education and historical experience have made us skeptical of all narratives that claim to possess definitive truths about the purpose of human existence. The answer to this situation cannot be found either in a nostalgic return to the past or in an escape forward toward technological utopias, but rather in developing a new form of wisdom that can integrate our modern intellectual sophistication with our fundamental human need for meaning. This new wisdom must be humble enough to recognize the limitations of any belief system, including itself, but also bold enough to affirm that the search for meaning continues to be one of the most fundamental human needs, and that it is possible to build provisional and revisable narratives that can guide our lives without claiming absolute authority. We need to learn to live with uncertainty without falling into nihilism, to embrace narratives we know are incomplete without becoming cynical, and to find purpose in collective projects, even knowing that all human projects are imperfect and temporary. A promising direction for this reconstruction of meaning can be found in developing what we might call humanistic scientific narratives that combine our growing understanding of physical reality with our deepest existential needs. Modern science has revealed to us that we are literally made of stardust, that our existence is the result of billions of years of cosmic evolution that transformed simple hydrogen into complex structures capable of contemplating their own origin. This is an origin narrative as impressive as any religious myth, but based on empirical evidence rather than divine revelation. We now understand that life on Earth is part of a continuous evolutionary process that led from the simple to the complex, from the unconscious to the conscious, and that our species represents, as far as we know, the first moment in the history of the universe when matter organized itself in such a way that it can reflect on itself and make conscious choices about its own future. This perspective can provide a foundation for a renewed sense of purpose and responsibility that does not depend on supernatural authorities, but emerges from the very structure of natural reality. At the same time, our growing understanding of the neurological and psychological mechanisms of human consciousness offers us powerful tools for cultivating mental states that promote well-being and meaning. Contemplative traditions that were developed over thousands of years to explore the nature of the human mind are being validated and refined through modern scientific research. We have discovered that practices like meditation, gratitude, and cultivation of compassion can literally alter brain structure in ways that promote happiness, resilience, and a sense of connection with other human beings. This convergence between ancient wisdom and modern science offers a path to develop what we might call evidence-based spiritual technologies that can help people find meaning and satisfaction without requiring them to accept beliefs that contradict their rational understanding of the world. Another crucial dimension of this reconstruction of meaning involves recognizing that while traditional meta-narratives have lost their universal authority, we can still create local and temporary narratives that give purpose and direction to our individual and community lives. Instead of seeking a single true story that explains the meaning of existence for all people everywhere, we can learn to build multiple and overlapping stories that respond to the specific needs of different individuals and groups at different times. A scientist can find profound meaning in contributing to our collective understanding of the universe, even knowing that any specific discovery is just a small step in an infinite journey of investigation. An artist can dedicate their life to creating beauty and emotional expression, even knowing that all works of art are subjective interpretations of human experience. A father or mother can find supreme purpose in caring for and educating their children, even knowing that each family is just one among billions, and that there is no guarantee about how future generations will use the inheritance they receive. An activist can fight passionately for social justice, even knowing that moral progress is slow and uncertain, and that any specific victory is only temporary. What these different narratives share is not specific content about the ultimate meaning of existence, but rather a common structure that allows individuals to experience their lives as participation in something greater than themselves. This structure can be found in any activity that combines three essential elements: a sense of contribution to something that transcends immediate personal interest, an experience of growth and development of human capacities, and a connection with a community of others who share similar values and goals. When these three elements are present, people report high levels of satisfaction and meaning, regardless of the specific content of their activities. This discovery suggests that meaning need not be derived from absolute cosmic truths, but can emerge from the relational structure of our lives and the quality of our engagement with the world around us. This insight leads us to a revolutionary understanding. Perhaps the crisis of meaning we are facing is not primarily about the loss of correct answers to the great questions of existence, but about the loss of social and cultural structures that facilitate meaningful experiences of engagement, growth, and connection. In other words, the problem is not that we no longer know what the purpose of life is, but that we organize our society in ways that make it difficult for people to live purposefully. If this analysis is correct, then the solution to the crisis of meaning will not be found primarily in philosophy or religion, although these disciplines certainly have important contributions to make, but in reorganizing our social, educational, and economic institutions to create more opportunities for people to experience meaningful contribution, personal growth, and authentic community connection. Imagine, for example, an educational system that, instead of focusing primarily on preparing students to compete for jobs in an uncertain job market, was dedicated to the integral development of the human person, including emotional, contemplative, creative, and ethical capacities that are essential for a meaningful life. Imagine workplaces that were organized not just to maximize efficiency and profit, but also to provide workers with opportunities to use their unique capabilities, develop new skills, and contribute to goals they themselves consider valuable. Imagine communities where people had multiple opportunities to participate in collective projects that address real challenges and improve quality of life for all members. Imagine an economy that recognized and rewarded forms of contribution that are currently invisible to the market, such as caring for children and the elderly, environmental preservation, artistic creation, and cultivation of wisdom. These are not impossible utopian fantasies, but concrete directions for social reform that are both desirable and feasible with the technologies and resources we already possess. The transition to a society organized around facilitating meaningful lives instead of maximizing economic growth will not be easy or quick, but there are encouraging signs that this transformation is already underway in many parts of the world. Movements like the well-being economy, which measures national success in terms of life satisfaction and sustainability, rather than just gross domestic product, are gaining traction in several countries. Companies adopting business models focused on purpose beyond profit are demonstrating that it is possible to create economically viable organizations that also contribute to human flourishing. Local communities are experimenting with innovative forms of participatory governance that give citizens more voice in decisions that affect their lives. Schools are pioneering curricula that integrate academic development with cultivation of emotional intelligence and contemplative skills. These are just the first steps in a long and complex journey, but they suggest that it is possible to imagine and work toward forms of social organization that honor both our need for meaning and our sophisticated understanding of the complexity of the modern world. The role of technology in this transformation will be crucial, but not in the sense of creating magical solutions to fundamental human problems. Instead, technology can be a powerful tool for facilitating authentic human connection, democratizing access to wisdom and growth opportunities, and creating new forms of participation in meaningful collective projects. We are already seeing examples of how digital platforms can be used to organize social movements, facilitate collaborative learning, connect people with shared interests and values, and create opportunities for creative contribution that transcend traditional geographical limitations. The challenge will be to develop these technologies in ways that amplify our humanity rather than replace it, that facilitate depth rather than superficiality, and that promote collaboration and mutual care rather than destructive competition and isolation. Perhaps one of the most fundamental changes needed is in how we think about the very concept of meaning. Instead of looking for a single permanent meaning that defines our lives once and for all, we can learn to embrace meaning as a dynamic and creative process that develops throughout our lives through our active engagement with the world. This perspective suggests that we do not discover meaning as if it were a hidden treasure waiting to be found, but rather create meaning through our choices, our actions, and our participation in humanity's collective life. This shift from discovery to creation is liberating because it means we do not need to wait for someone else to tell us what the purpose of our lives is, but it is also empowering because it means we are co-creators of the meaning our existence will have. When we understand that we are active participants in the creation of meaning rather than passive recipients of pre-existing meaning, our contemporary existential crisis can be transformed into an unprecedented historical opportunity. For the first time in human history, we have the knowledge, tools, and freedom necessary to consciously design ways of living that honor both our need for meaning and our understanding of the complexity and interconnection of reality. We can choose to create narratives that are inspiring without being dogmatic, that are unifying without being exclusive, that are hopeful without being naive. We can build communities that nurture individual flourishing while addressing collective challenges. We can develop technologies that expand our capacity to create, connect, and care for one another. We can cultivate wisdom that integrates the best of all human traditions with the best of our contemporary knowledge. The journey of reconstructing meaning in the post-meta-narrative era will not be completed by any individual or generation, but it is a collective project that can give purpose and direction to our lives while we participate in it. Every person who chooses to live intentionally and connectedly, every community that experiments with more sustainable and inclusive forms of social organization, every inventor who creates technologies that serve human flourishing rather than exploit it, every artist who expresses profound truths about human experience, every educator who helps others develop wisdom and compassion, is contributing to this great work of civilizational recreation. This is a project that is simultaneously humble and grandiose, local and universal, pragmatic and visionary. It invites us to embrace our responsibility as co-creators of the human future while remaining grounded in present reality with all its limitations and possibilities. If these reflections have touched something you have been feeling, but perhaps have not found words to express, know that you are not alone. By engaging with this content, you connect with a growing community of people who share your concerns and your desire for a deeper understanding of the existential challenges of our time. Each week, we meet here to explore together the great questions that define our era and to seek not just understanding, but also wiser ways of living amid the transformations we are witnessing. This is not just a channel, but a space for dialogue and collective growth where we can build together narratives that honor both our need for meaning and our modern intellectual sophistication. Join us on this ongoing journey. Subscribe so we can continue this essential conversation about how to create meaningful lives in a world that often leaves us disoriented, and to discover together that the crisis of meaning can be transformed into the greatest opportunity of our time for conscious and collaborative human flourishing. The truth is that the crisis is not political, although politics is affected by it. The crisis is not technological, although technology is both cause and potential solution. The crisis is one of meaning, and understanding this may be the first step toward a transformation that goes far beyond what we can imagine today. The future is being created now through the choices we make individually and collectively, and each of us has a role to play in the great work of civilizational reconstruction that defines our era. This is our inheritance and our responsibility, to be the generation that learned to create meaning consciously, to live purposefully in a complex universe, and to build a future where human flourishing is not just possible, but inevitable.
Yuval Noah Harari, I'm very happy to see you. Thank you for coming.
It's my pleasure. It's good to be here.
Well, we're going to talk about your book, Nexus. And after reading it, I've been thinking a lot about, well, the end of the world and annihilation of the human species. I mean, do you go around thinking like that as well?
I think it's a possibility, but it's not deterministic, it's not inevitable. The whole point of writing a book warning about these dangerous scenarios is that these are just scenarios. We still have the power, the resources to prevent them. But, you know, every previous technology, in a way, empowered us. Even nuclear weapons, of course, they could destroy us, but only if we decide. Atom bombs empowered us because the bomb cannot decide who to bomb, who to kill. You always need a human being to make the decisions. AI is different. It's the first technology in history that can make decisions by itself, which means that it's no longer a tool, it's an agent. It's an independent agent. Similarly, it's the first technology in history that can create new ideas by itself. And of course also invent new weapons. So it's like a nuclear bomb that can invent a more powerful nuclear bomb that can invent an even more powerful nuclear bomb. It doesn't have to go in that direction. It's not inherently evil or bad. It has a lot of positive potential. It could provide us with the best healthcare in history. It could help us prevent catastrophic climate change. And this is really just the beginning of the process. You know, if you think about the evolution of organic beings, so it took billions of years to get from amoebas to dinosaurs. Digital evolution is millions of times faster. And if GPT-4 or ChatGPT, this is the amoeba, so how would the T-Rex look like?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're right that it won't be what we imagine, that it won't be like in Matrix or Terminator where artificial intelligence will roam the streets and kill people.
No.
But so what will it look like? I mean, what are the potential dangerous outcome?
It's not like there is one big computer somewhere that is trying to take over the world. AIs, we need to think about them as millions, potentially billions, of new non-human agents that fill more and more positions in more and more systems, bureaucracies, corporations, armies, governments. Again, making decisions about the world and about our life. And we, in the process, not just losing our power, but losing the ability to understand the world. Because increasingly we don't understand how these things make decisions. We don't understand these extremely complex systems. I mean, what we have seen already in recent years is that AIs are taking over to some extent our culture, our society, the conversation. You know, on social media, some of the most important decisions about what kind of content to promote is being taken by algorithms. And the AIs decide to promote hate speech and fake news and conspiracy theory because they were given the task of increasing user engagement. This is like the holy grail of social media companies, is increase user engagement. And the algorithms discovered, by trial and error, by experimenting on millions of people, that outrage gets engagement. And this has already resulted in increased polarization in societies all over the world, from Myanmar to the United States. And again, this is just the beginning, because so far these algorithms were promoting content created by human beings. Somebody needed, a human being had to invent the conspiracy theory that then the algorithm promoted. Now, with the new generation of AIs, they can create the content by themselves.
Well, do you also think, I mean, in Nexus you draw from history to predict or paint a picture of what might happen if we don't regulate AI now or soon. And I mean, you write about the other technical revolutions, like the printing press and the industrial revolutions. What do you think is the most important lesson that we can learn from history to use today?
I mean, there are two lessons. First of all, that if you create a completely free market of information, truth will not prevail. Truth is more complicated, more costly, more painful than fictions and lies and mythologies. You know, even as a journalist, you want to just invent some fictional story, that's very easy. You want to write the truth, you have to invest a lot of time and energy and effort. Similarly, if you think about the other side of the equation, the audience, for the audience to connect to a truthful story is often more difficult because reality is complex, it's complicated. So it demands a lot of effort to really understand a true story. Whereas a fictional story, you can make it as simple as possible. So if you want the truth to win, you have to tilt the balance, you have to invest something. The other lesson that we learned from previous big technological revolutions is that humans are extremely adaptable, but the process of adaptation is costly and dangerous. When humans began to develop industrial technology, nobody knew how to build a good industrial society. So there were various experiments. Imperialism was a huge experiment in building industrial societies. There were lots of people in the 19th and early 20th century who thought an industrial society, it has to be an empire, because you need to control the source of raw material and you need to control the markets. So we have to build an empire. And this type of thinking, you know, it spread. Britain and France and Japan and Russia and the United States, they all went about building empires. And with terrible consequences for hundreds of millions of people, until people realized, no, you can build an industrial society which isn't an empire. And similarly, you had other people who said the only way to build a really efficient industrial society is communism. And you had this huge experiment with communism in the Soviet Union and other places, which again was extremely costly. And the same with fascism. Fascism was also a huge experiment, failed experiment in how to build an industrial society. So you can say, okay, after all these experiments, after imperialism and communism and fascism and the two world wars, we finally got it right. And we can argue about it, but let's say that we got it right. If we have to go again through this process, this time with AI and bioengineering, we don't know how to build these kind of AI-based societies, so we have to go through another cycle of failed experiments, more imperialism and totalitarianism and world war, and in the end, we'll get it right. This is very bad news. So the historical lesson is, don't just think about the end result.
But do you also think that we can learn from literature? I mean, haven't we been warned by Mary Shelley, Philip K. Dick, William Gibson, Isaac Asimov?
We have been warned, and it's very important, it's very good that we have been warned. I think the most important literary genre of our era is science fiction, because it attempts it engages with all these possibilities and attempts to warn us about the dangers and to speculate about how to build better societies. But for this to be successful, I think that science fiction needs to really dig deep into how technology changes in a fundamental way relations between human beings. Because you have a lot of science fiction which is just, you know, like taking a very old story and reenacting it with robots. So you can do like Romeo and Juliet with robots, or in space with laser guns and spaceships, and it is still Romeo and Juliet. I mean, it doesn't tell you anything new about how humans relate to each other.
But you also write that we need more fiction about bureaucracy.
Yeah, this is, I think, the biggest lacuna in art, is that art is not very good in explaining bureaucracy.
We have Kafka.
We have Kafka, we have Catch-22. It's not completely missing. But if you look, say, at the big blockbusters...
It's not the bestsellers, no.
Yes, it's not the bestsellers, it's not the blockbusters. And this is a problem, because our life is managed mainly by bureaucratic systems. But then when we open the television and we watch a TV series about politics, it's likely to ignore the bureaucracy and instead to tell us a medieval or even Stone Age story about dynastic politics. The focus is on a family or a couple of families and the kind of basic biological dramas that characterize competition within or between families. So you have something like Succession, with the kids competing for the attention of the father. This is a very important story, which was crafted by evolution already millions of years before there were humans. This is, you know, this is chimpanzee stuff. They know it also. And it's not a good guide for how politics in the 21st century actually happens. Because if we don't have these kinds of stories, then people don't understand the world. They easily fall victim to conspiracy theories about, you know, the deep state and all these, I don't know, cabals that control the world. But in fact, it's bureaucracy, it's not conspiracy. And it also makes it more difficult for us to change the system. You feel helpless. You know, evolution kind of prepared us for death by a tiger, not for death by a document.
No.
And today, a lot more people are dying because of documents than because of tigers.
So, are you positive, are you optimistic, or are you pessimistic for our future? I know it's a hard question.
I try to be a realist. I mean, you know, basically optimism is like saying, oh, everything will be okay. And pessimism, no, we are all doomed. Both these positions, they make us abdicate responsibility. Because if in the end everything will be okay, why bother? You don't need to take action. And it's the same if we are doomed, so why waste whatever little time we have on taking action? Realism is understanding that we have, as human beings, as a human species, we still have the resources, the technology, the wisdom to deal with major challenges, whether it's climate change or whether it's the rise of AI. Again, for instance, when I think about climate change, one of the things that people should realize is what is the cost of preventing catastrophic climate change? What is what size of a check do you need to write if you want to solve this? How much money? And nobody knows for sure, but the best estimates we have, something like 2%, 3%, maybe 5% of global GDP. Now, this is a lot, but it's completely doable. If I told you it's 50%, then forget it. We are not going to do it. It's not like if you're a dinosaur 65 million years ago, when the asteroid comes, then don't bother. I mean, there is nothing you can do about it. But we are not like the dinosaurs. To shift even 5% of our resources from one aim, one field to another, this is what politicians do all the time.
Well, Professor Harari, it was a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Why do humans rule the world? The answer, in brief, is because we are the most imaginative of all the animals. We invent and believe stories that no other animals will believe. That really fiction is the basis for human power, which sounds very strange. How come fictional stories be the basis for power? But humans are powerful because we can cooperate better than any other animal. And ultimately, all human cooperation is based on fictions. Gods are fictional stories, but also money is a fictional story, and nations are fictional stories. And it is because we believe things that no other animal can believe that we control the planet. The problem of truth is that the truth, first of all, is costly, whereas fiction is very cheap. If you want to write a truthful history book about the Roman Empire, for instance, you need to invest a lot of energy, time, money. You need to study Latin. You probably need to study Greek, ancient Greek. You need to do archaeological excavations and find these ancient, whether inscriptions or pottery or weapons, and analyze them. Very costly and difficult. To write a fictional story about the Roman Empire, very easy. You just write anything you want and it's there on the page or on the internet. The truth is often also very complicated because reality is complicated. You want to give a truthful explanation for why the Roman Republic fell or why the Roman Empire eventually fell. Very complicated. Whereas fiction can be made as simple as possible, and people tend to prefer simple explanations over complicated ones. And finally, the truth can be painful, unattractive. We often don't want to know the truth about ourselves, whether as individuals, which is why we go to therapy for many years to know the things we don't want to know about ourselves, and also on the level of entire nations. You know, each nation has its own dark episodes, its own skeletons or cemeteries in the closet that people don't want to know about. A politician that, in an election campaign would just tell people the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, is unlikely to win many votes. So in this competition between the truth, which is costly and complicated and sometimes painful, and fiction, which is cheap and simple and you can make it very attractive, fiction tends to win. And if you look at, the large-scale systems, networks in history, they are often built on fictions, not on the truth.